Okay, this is an instructional video on the focus exercise. The focus exercise is a very critical exercise because it addresses some key issues. One key issue is communication. You have to be able to communicate with your dog if you're going to effectively train your dog, especially if you intend to ever have your dog off leash. You have to have verbal control. Your leash is only so far, and the dog can get farther than that range very, very quickly. So if you're going to extend your range beyond the 6-foot leash, you need to be able to communicate effectively, both what the dog likes and sounds that the dog does not like. The focus exercise is designed to build power into your voice. It is designed to create avoidance of distractions. If your dog is distracted by other dogs, cats, people, the wind, you are not going to effectively communicate to your dog because the dog's not listening. It doesn't matter how smart you are, if the dog is not paying attention to you, you're not going to be able to communicate effectively. So the focus exercise has two goals. Create avoidance of the distractions so the dog no longer wants to go to the cat. The dog no longer wants to lunge through the door. The dog no longer wants to go after the other dog. Okay? So we're creating avoidance. How do you create avoidance? You associate the behavior with something unpleasant. So this is an on-leash exercise using a corrective collar that is appropriate for your dog. Some dogs a flat collar is effective. Some dogs will need a choke chain. Some dogs will need a pinch collar. Some dogs will need an electric collar. Once again, how hard you have to correct the dog is not up to you. It is up to the individual dog. Some dogs are very soft and sensitive. Some dogs are very, very tolerant of corrections, just like some people are tolerant of corrections. We all know what the speed limit is. Some of us push that. Most of us have speeding tickets, go right back to speeding. So that shows a tolerance for that behavior. We know it's wrong, but we're still going to do it. Our goal as we train dogs is to find the level of correction that the dog will not tolerate. If the police wanted us to quit speeding, every speeding ticket would be a mandatory $500. No questions, no debate. People would quit speeding very quickly. No one would tolerate that level of correction for speeding. It wouldn't be worth it. So we'd just stop it. The police do not want us to stop speeding. That's a discussion for another day. We do want our dogs to never be corrected. That is our goal. We don't want to have to correct the dogs. We want the dogs to avoid the corrections. The only reason we need to correct the dog at all is for their own good, to protect them. There are going to be situations that come up that are out of your control. And there are going to be mistakes that the dog makes that you need to communicate to the dog quickly. Stop. Move away from that. That's a dangerous situation. So if you believe that you can get through life with your dog without creating avoidance of the word you're kidding yourself. This dog needs you as its owner to help it navigate through the very difficult rural environment, urban environment that you put it in. Okay? So there are situations that will come up where communication is critical to save your dog's life. So you need to develop this sound. Along with the pleasant sounds that we'll talk about in other videos, you need to develop this sound. It means stop what you're doing now and don't do it again. Okay? So in the focus exercise, we're creating avoidance of distractions and we're building power into our voice. I'm going to try to describe what a focus exercise looks like. It's a lot easier to do with a dog, but in this limited format, this is what we've got. So bear with me as I try to describe what a focus exercise looks like. On leash, 6-foot, light leather leash, whatever collar is appropriate. Start with a flat collar, and if it works, great. If it doesn't work, get a collar that's more effective. And by effective, I mean can correct the dog harder. So flat collar first, choke chain second, small pinch collar is next. When you use a pinch collar, you do not want to use the big, honking 5-pound pinch collar that the pet stores will try to sell you. You want a very thin, light pinch collar, typically made for small dogs such as poodles. You can add links for a larger dog. So you may have to buy 2 pinch collars and put them together. And when you buy the very small, thin lengths. The purpose of that, I hate to digress from the video, but the purpose of having the small pinch collar instead of a medium or a large is so that you can have a light piece of equipment. It's very hard to trick dogs. Dogs aren't stupid. They know when there's a correction collar on and when there's not a correction collar on. If you use a collar that weighs 2 or 3 pounds, you're never going to get away from it. The dog will know. But if you use a very light piece of equipment and you leave it on the dog 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until you don't need it anymore, until when you say stop, the dog stops, then that'll be an effective piece of equipment. So try to get the lightest collar that you can get when you're doing the focus exercise. So once again, we start with a loose leash. We're going to walk in a random pattern. We're not going to go from the house to the car to the car to the house. As we walk with the dog and we see that the dog is not paying attention to us, with no warning, you simply do a 180-degree turn and go the other direction. So the dog's walking this way, and then you turn around and go that way. The dog runs out of the leash, basically corrects itself, runs to you, and all you're doing is walking away, and you bend down and pet the dog. So the dog is reassured that staying near you is a good behavior and will get them rewarded. So continue to walk. As the dog loses focus, looks ahead of you, change directions. The last thing that the dog sees before the correction is its own behavior. It's distracted behavior. It's looking ahead towards the door frame or the car door open or the dog or the cat. Whatever it is causing the dog to lose its focus on you is what's in the dog's mind. It feels the correction, associates the correction with the other dog, the cat, the sniffing of the ground, the lunging through the gate, whatever the behavior was right before the correction, that's what the dog's going to associate the correction with. And that is good timing. To communicate effectively, you have to have good timing. So the last thing the dog sees is the distraction. The last thing the dog hears is your voice warning. Right before you snap that leash, it hears the sound, feels the correction. Later, if you've done this properly, the dog doesn't need to be on the leash. All it has to know is means something bad is coming and it will stop. Once again, this is just conditioning. You, as a human, would not be afraid of thunder if you did not know what lightning was. If you'd never seen lightning, did not know what lightning did, you wouldn't be affected by thunder. But as it is, you've been conditioned. If I hear thunder, I will seek shelter because I know what comes next after thunder is lightning. Most dogs do not know what comes after is a correction because all they've ever heard is no, 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 no. Nothing ever happened. So they ignore that sound. You have to condition that sound. You have to teach your dog means something bad is fixing to happen. But you have a chance as a dog to avoid the bad thing by changing your behavior. So it's not jerk, then The sound comes first. The dog has a chance. And this is very easy to remember. And it seems silly to have to describe, but people do this wrong all the time. So I will describe. The sound comes first. The dog has to have a chance to avoid. So remember it this way. Which would you rather me do to you? Slap you first and then go duck? Or would you rather me warn you, duck, give you a chance to avoid the correction? That's what we're trying to accomplish with your dog. We're trying to give them a chance to avoid the correction by conditioning a sound that they can rely on to avoid corrections. So loose leash, random pattern, change directions, verbally warn the dog, then snap and release the leash. Remember, loose leash. That is the most important part of this exercise, that the leash is loose. 2 reasons why the leash has to stay loose. 1, you cannot effectively correct the dog with a tight leash. All you can do is tug. You pull on them, they pull on you, and we just get into a tug-of-war battle. You won't win that battle. Jerk, pull the dog, they pull you. It creates frustration. It creates more desire to actually pull, especially in a dog that's been protection trained. You pull them, they want to pull back. That's the way they were trained. in protection to pull and to lunge. So you could accidentally be encouraging the dog to be aggressive by holding the lead tight. Okay? So loose leash is critical for an effective correction. The other reason you want the leash to be loose is so that there's no communication through the leash. If our goal is to have off-leash control, then we cannot rely on the leash to give the dog commands. If you're pulling on the dog as a signal to stay with me, what signal is there for when the dog is off-leash? There is no signal. There is no signal to sit if you're relying on a pull up to get the dog to sit and a pull down to get the dog to down. So we must not rely on the leash for signals. The leash stays loose. The leash is on this dog for one reason and one reason only, which is to correct them if they make a mistake. So once again, loose leash, random pattern, right when you see, you're watching the dog out of the corner of your eye, right when you see that this dog is not paying attention to you, it looks this way, you go that way. It looks this way, you go that way. You're trying to teach the dog to focus on you and to avoid distractions. A couple of things to remember when you're doing this exercise. You're setting the dog up. You're doing this on purpose. So when you see a distraction, don't avoid it. Don't go on the other side of the street because there's someone on that side with a dog or a cat. Go right towards it. Loose leash, random pattern, go right towards it. Now, you're probably thinking, what am I going to do when there is no leash on the dog? Well, there should not be a situation where the dog is off leash until you have verbal control. So if the problem is in the house when company comes, make sure that the leash is on the dog before you let the company in. If you're having random problems of behavior in the house, make sure the leash stays on the dog, even in the house. Buy a cheap lead and let the dog drag it. There's no harm in it, and it allows you to very quickly and very effectively communicate to the dog what you don't like about their behavior. So communication is critical. If you don't have good timing, you're not going to have good communication. Okay? So the focus exercise is something that needs to be practiced. It will create avoidance of distractions. It will create avoidance of aggressive behavior. If the dog is looking at another dog, posturing in an aggressive manner, you've waited too long. You should have already corrected this dog. As soon as her head or his head spins towards the other dog, your voice comes, snap the leash, the dog looks at you and you're petting him. Good puppy. Very quickly this dog's going to understand you do not want them to engage this other dog. But if you're holding the leash back and you're holding tight on the leash, this creates frustration and lunging and, oh, I got to get this other dog. It must be what they want me to do. Loose leash, quick jerk, voice first, and you will be amazed how quickly this behavior goes away.